Tariq Nasser had spent 3 standard years on outpost Helios, without giving much thought to the diplomats who cycled through. His hands were usually too busy calibrating gravitation regulators or rewiring neural networks in the station's aging infrastructure to care about political affairs. Until today, the shuttlecraft that docked in Bay 17 wasn't remarkable, just another sleek diplomatic vessel from some world he couldn't pronounce. What was remarkable was the woman who stepped out of it. She moved with fluid grace that seemed to defy the station's artificial gravity. Her skin was a deep violet, almost luminescent under the bay's harsh lighting. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and entirely silver, surveyed the loading dock with quiet assessment. Most striking was the cascade of iridescent hair that flowed down her back like liquid starlight, shimmering between lavender and periwinkle with each movement. Tariq realized he was starring only when his handheld diagnostic tool beeped angrily at being ignored. He fumbled it, cursing under his breath as it clattered to the deck. The sound drew her attention, silver eyes locking onto his brown ones across the bustling bay. For one breathless moment, the universe seemed to contract to just the two of them. Then, inexplicably, she smiled, a subtle curve of full, purple-tinged lips. Tariq felt heat rise in his cheeks as he quickly retrieved his tool and returned to the open panel he'd been working on. But his eyes kept drifting back to her as she was greeted by station officials and escorted away. "That's a Celestial," came a voice beside him, making him jump. His colleague Juno leaned against the wall, arms crossed and smirking. "From Xylanthia, they don't come to human stations often." "What are they doing here?" Tariq asked, attempting nonchalance. "Some diplomatic summit about mineral rights in the Vega sector." Juno shrugged. "She'll be gone in a week, and before you get any ideas, Celestials don't typically fraternize with humans, something about our disruptive energy patterns or whatever." "I wasn't getting ideas," Tariq protested, though his mind was already racing with them. 3 days later, he was elbow-deep in the environmental systems of Level 7, when a melodic voice floated down the corridor. "Excuse me, I believe I'm lost." Tariq extracted himself from the maintenance shaft and found himself face to face with the celestial diplomat. Up close, her violet skin had subtle patterns almost like constellations across her temples and cheekbones. "Oh, hello," he managed, suddenly aware of the grease smeared across his coveralls. "Where are you trying to get to?" "The Arboretum," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his chest rather than his ears. "I was told it was on this level, but the station's layout is challenging." Tariq smiled. "That's diplomatic speak for poorly designed. And you're close, it's just through that junction and left at the second corridor." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You're the technician from the docking bay." His heart stuttered. "You noticed me." "You were starring," she said, but without accusation. "I'm Nalani, representing the Celestial Conclave." "Tariq Nasser, Station Systems Specialist representing. Well, just myself, I guess." That earned him another smile. "Perhaps you could show me the way. I'd hate to get lost again." As they walked together, Tariq tried to maintain professionalism despite the curious glances from passing station personnel. Human-celestial interactions were uncommon enough to draw attention. "Is this your first time on a human station?" he asked. "Yes, we typically conduct diplomacy through holographic intermediaries, but this negotiation was deemed important enough for personal representation." Nalani moved with fluid precision, each step seemingly choreographed. "Your station's energy flows are chaotic. It's somewhat disorienting." "Energy flows?" Tariq raised an eyebrow. "Celestials perceive vibrational energies," she explained. "Your technology, your people, everything emits patterns we can sense. It's why we tend to keep our distance from other species. The discord can be overwhelming." "Yet here you are," he noted. "Yes," she said softly, "here I am." The Arboretum doors slid open, revealing the station's pride, a vast chamber of transplanted earth vegetation mingled with exotic plants from a dozen worlds. Artificial sunlight streamed through transparent ceiling panels, creating the illusion of a planetary garden. Nalani's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her silver eyes widened, and a soft sound escaped her lips, not quite a gasp, more like a musical note. The faint patterns on her skin seemed to brighten. "This is unexpected," she whispered. "So much life energy all harmonizing." Tarek watched her, captivated by her response. I come here when the station feels too sterile. It reminds me of Earth. She turned to him. Will you show me your favorites? For the next hour, they wandered through the arboretum as Tarek pointed out Japanese maples, Terran roses, and the adaptable Martian ferns that had evolved from Earth stock during the first colonization. Nalani absorbed everything with genuine curiosity, asking questions about Earth's ecosystems and humanity's connection to plant life. In turn, she shared snippets about Xalanthia, a world of crystalline forests and bioluminescent oceans, where celestials lived in cities that grew rather than were built. Our structures resonate with our energies, she explained as they sat beside a small stream. They respond to emotional harmonies, reshaping themselves to accommodate our needs. That sounds beautiful, Tarek said, and impossibly advanced. Not advanced, just different. Nalani's gaze met his. Your technology fascinates me as much as ours seems to fascinate you, such different approaches to solving the same universal challenges. As their conversation deepened, Tarek found himself revealing more than he usually would to a stranger: his childhood in New Alexandria, his passion for systems integration, his dreams of someday designing his own outpost. Nalani listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that suggested a deeper understanding of engineering principles than he would have expected from a diplomat. Their tranquil exchange was interrupted by a chime from her wrist device. The summit reconvenes, she said with visible reluctance. I must return. As they walked back toward the diplomatic section, Tarek gathered his courage. Would you? I mean, if you have time tomorrow. The geological survey results are being presented all day, she said, her expression unreadable. But perhaps the evening meal cycle. I've been curious about your station's dining facility. Tarek's heart leapt. It's nothing special, but I know which synthesizer programs are worth trying. They parted at the security checkpoint to the diplomatic wing. As Nalani turned to leave, the light caught her profile in a way that made the constellation patterns on her skin shimmer. Tarek, she called back, thank you for the garden. That night, Tarek lay awake in his quarters, replaying their conversation. He told himself not to read too much into it. She was just a diplomat being diplomatic, a curious alien studying human customs. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see were silver eyes and violet skin, and all he could hear was that melodic voice that seemed to resonate directly with something deep inside him, something that had been dormant until now. The station's main dining hall was a cacophony of sounds, smells, and species when Tarek arrived. He traded his work coveralls for his only decent civilian clothes, a deep blue tunic with silver threading that his sister had insisted would bring out his eyes when she'd gifted it to him last solstice. He scanned the crowded space anxiously, wondering if Nalani would actually appear. The rational part of his brain reminded him that this wasn't a date, merely cultural exchange with a curious diplomat. Then he saw her. Nalani stood just inside the entrance, a vision in flowing garments that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. The fabric, if it could be called that, rippled like liquid starlight against her violet skin. Several nearby diners had stopped eating to stare, conversations faltering mid-sentence. When she spotted him and moved in his direction, Tarek felt an absurd surge of pride, as though he'd somehow won a competition he hadn't known he'd entered. You came, he said, immediately regretting the obviousness of the statement. I said I would. Her silver eyes assessed him with quiet interest. Your attire is different. The material carries your energy pattern more harmoniously. Tarek felt his cheeks warm. Thank you. Yours is... Well, honestly, I'm not sure what your clothing is made of, but it's incredible. Living silk, she explained, running a hand along her sleeve. It responds to my body's resonances and the ambient energies around me. Is that why it seems to move on its own? She nodded. It's finding equilibrium with the station's energy patterns. Her expression turned slightly mischievous, and perhaps responding to certain, localized energies. Before Tarek could process the implications of that statement, she gestured toward the busy food dispensaries. How does one navigate this sensory overload? The dining hall offered cuisine from across the federated worlds, synthesized versions of Earth classics alongside alien delicacies programmed by various diplomatic missions. Tarek guided Nailani through the options, explaining the origin of each dish with perhaps more enthusiasm than necessary. This one's Terran Thai, spicy but worth it. And this is modified Centaurian root soup, supposedly close to the original but less likely to dissolve human tooth enamel. Nailani regarded the options with skepticism. Celestials typically consume energy-infused nectars and crystalline fruits. Our digestive systems are different. The system can analyze your biology and suggest compatible options, Tarek offered, gesturing to the scanner beside the dispenser. After some hesitation, Nailani placed her slender hand on the device. It hummed, then displayed a short list of options. Fascinating, she murmured. It suggests diluted honey water and something called mango sorbet. Tarek grinned. Sweet tooth, huh? At least we have that in common. They found a relatively quiet corner table, drawing curious glances that Tarek pretended not to notice. Nailani seemed unbothered by the attention, her focus entirely on the small bowl of golden sorbet before her. Her first taste was tentative, then her eyes widened and the patterns on her skin brightened noticeably. "This is unexpected," she said, voice tinged with wonder. "The flavor resonates with a harmonic frequency I find quite pleasing." "That's a fancy way of saying you like it," Tarek laughed. "Indeed," she took another spoonful. "Your species' preoccupation with flavor is beginning to make sense." As they ate, their conversation drifted from station operations to cultural differences. Tarek learned that Celestials communicated not just through words, but through subtle vibrational frequencies, resonances that carried emotional context beyond verbal meaning. "It's why we find most interspecies interactions challenging," she explained. "What you say and what your energy patterns convey often conflict. It's like hearing two conversations simultaneously." "And what do my energy patterns say?" Tarek asked, half joking. Nailani studied him with an intensity that made his skin tingle. Curiosity, ambition, loneliness. A pause, attraction. Tarek nearly choked on his food. "That obvious, huh?" "To me, yes," her voice softened. "Though I admit I find the clarity of your patterns unusual. Most humans project chaotic, contradictory energies. Yours are remarkably harmonious." "And is that a good thing?" "It's dangerous," she said, so quietly he almost missed it. Before he could press further, a commotion erupted across the hall. 3 uniformed security officers had surrounded a hulking, blue-skinned Doraxian trader who was gesticulating wildly. "The treaty clearly states," the Doraxian bellowed. "The treaty applies to verified citizens," one officer responded calmly. "Your identification shows discrepancies." The Doraxian's massive fists clenched. "Bureaucratic nonsense." Tarek tensed, recognizing the warning signs of an escalating situation. The Doraxian species was known for volatile temperaments and formidable strength. To his shock, Nailani rose gracefully and moved toward the confrontation before he could stop her. "Perhaps I might assist," she addressed the group, her melodic voice somehow cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to her. The security officers straightened instinctively in the presence of a diplomatic representative. The Doraxian's scowl deepened. "This doesn't concern Celestials," he growled. "Peace concerns all sentient beings," Nailani replied. Then to Tarek's amazement, she began to hum. No, not exactly humming. She produced a multi-layered tone that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and resonate directly within his chest. The sound was subtle yet unmistakable, a calming vibration that spread through the immediate area. The effect on the Doraxian was immediate. His massive shoulders relaxed, his breathing steadied, and the dangerous gleam in his amber eyes dimmed. "Perhaps," Nailani suggested to the officers, "we might review the documentation in the administrative office rather than the dining hall." 15 minutes later, when she returned to their table, the incident had been resolved peacefully. Tarek stared at her with undisguised wonder. "What did you do to him?" Nailani resumed her seat with perfect composure. "A basic calming resonance. Doraxians are particularly susceptible to the G minor frequency range." "That's incredible." "It's a basic diplomatic skill for Celestials," she shrugged elegantly. "Though I should not have interfered, my superiors would consider it inappropriate use of resonance abilities with non-approved species." Tarek leaned forward, Do you always follow the rules? A flicker of something, amusement, defiance, crossed her features. I am here speaking with you, am I not? The implication hung between them, charged with possibility. After dinner, Tarek offered to show her the station's observation deck, a transparent dome offering unobstructed views of the surrounding nebula and distant stars. To his delight, she accepted. They stood side by side at the railing, watching the swirling cosmic gases paint purple and blue streaks across the black canvas of space. It's beautiful, Nalani whispered. From Xalanthia, the stars appear different. Our atmosphere refracts light in ways that create constant auroras. I can't imagine growing up under skis like that, Tarek said. And I cannot imagine your Earth with its single sun and white moon. She turned to him. Tell me about your home. Tarek described the sprawling city-state of New Alexandria with its fusion of ancient architecture and cutting-edge technology. He told her about desert winds carrying spice-scented air through holographic market streets, about the annual light festival when the city's massive pyramids glowed with synchronized illuminations. As he spoke, he noticed Nalani swaying slightly, her eyes half closed. Am I boring you? He asked, suddenly self-conscious. Quite the opposite, she murmured. Your voice creates remarkable resonance patterns. I can almost see your city through the vibrations. Is that a celestial thing, hearing, pictures? Something like that, she opened her eyes fully. When emotions are strong enough, they create vivid resonance patterns. Your love for your home makes your description immersive. Their conversation continued as the observation deck emptied of other visitors. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, they drifted closer together until their shoulders nearly touched. Your diplomatic mission ends soon, Tarek said finally, voicing the thought that had been nagging at him all evening. 3 more days, she confirmed, a note of regret coloring her musical voice. Will you, he hesitated, uncertain how to frame the question. Could we meet again before you leave? Nalani was quiet for a long moment. When she turned to face him fully, the patterns on her skin pulsed with subtle luminescence. This is unwise, she said softly. Celestials and humans rarely form connections. Our physiologies, our cultures, they are not designed to integrate. I'm not asking for integration, Tarek said, emboldened by the fact that she hadn't refused outright. Just time to know you better. Why? The question seemed genuine, not accusatory. Because you're the most fascinating person I've met in 3 years on this station, he answered honestly. Because you see the universe differently than I do, and I want to understand how. Because when you speak, something in me resonates. At that last word, the patterns on her skin flared briefly, a reaction she couldn't conceal. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. That word has significant meaning for my kind. Then teach me, he said simply. Their eyes locked, his dark brown against her liquid silver. The moment stretched between them, fraught with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Nalani reached out, her violet fingers hovering just above his hand on the railing, not quite touching. Tomorrow, she said, there's a recess in the summit during the afternoon cycle. Meet me at the Arboretum. I'll be there, he promised. She turned to leave, then paused. Tarek, celestials form connections differently than humans. For us, resonance is intimate. It's why we rarely interact closely with other species. Their discordant patterns can be painful. And mine, he asked, hardly daring to breathe. Yours, she said with a small, mysterious smile, is why I'm breaking protocol. With that, she glided away, her living silk clothing rippling like captured starlight around her slender form. Tarek remained at the railing long after she'd gone, staring out at the nebula without really seeing it. His mind raced with questions, possibilities, and warnings he chose to ignore. 3 more days. Whatever was happening between them, this impossible, improbable connection had an expiration date. The rational part of him knew he should pull back now before he invested too much emotion in something doomed to end. But as he finally turned to leave the observation deck, Tarek knew rationality had already lost this particular battle. The gentle rhythm of his heartbeat seemed to whisper a single word with each pulse. Resonance. The Arboretum's artificial lighting had been adjusted to simulate late afternoon, casting long shadows through the foliage when Tarek arrived. He had managed to reschedule his maintenance duties, calling in a favor from Juno that would certainly cost him later, but it was worth it. 3 more days with Nalani was all he had, and he intended to make each moment count. He found her kneeling beside a small pond, one slender violet hand skimming the water's surface. Ripples expanded from her touch in perfect concentric circles that somehow never overlapped or canceled each other out, defying the physics he understood. "That's impossible," he said by way of greeting. Nalani looked up, her silver eyes crinkling with amusement. "Only according to your understanding of wave dynamics. Are you manipulating the water molecules?" "I'm harmonizing with them." She stood in one fluid motion. Water remembers vibrations. It responds to resonance patterns with remarkable sensitivity. Tarek shook his head in wonder. "Every time I think I understand what Celestials can do, you show me something new." "We barely understand ourselves," she admitted. "Our abilities evolved over millennia of living on a world saturated with crystal energies. Some theorize we were once more like humans before the Great Resonance changed Xylanthia." The Great Resonance? An ancient cataclysm or miracle depending on who tells the story. Her expression grew distant. "Our histories say that a cosmic event caused our planet's core to crystallize suddenly, sending waves of transformative energy across the surface. Those who survived changed." Tarek tried to imagine it, an entire species transformed by cosmic forces. "That's why your skin has those patterns, the constellation-like markings." "Yes, they're called luminara, crystalline deposits just beneath the skin that channel and respond to energy flows." She gestured around them. "In this environment, they're relatively dormant, but on Xylanthia, under our crystal moons, they would illuminate your entire path." "I'd like to see that someday," Tarek said without thinking. Nalani's expression softened. "Few non-celestials ever visit our world. The ambient energy overwhelms most species' nervous systems." "Is that why celestials rarely leave home, the discomfort of other environments?" "Partly." She began walking along one of the Arboretum's winding paths, gesturing for him to join her. "But it's also cultural. My people fear dilution of our resonance abilities through extended contact with discordant energies. Isolation has become tradition masquerading as protection." "Yet you're here," Tarek pointed out, falling into step beside her. "I volunteered," she confessed. "Most celestial diplomats are elder resonance masters who have spent decades learning to shield themselves from foreign energies. I'm considerably younger. Rebelling against tradition." Her laugh was like crystal wind chimes. "Seeking understanding. The conclave debates isolation versus engagement endlessly, but few have experienced both to make informed judgments." They walked deeper into the Arboretum, past flowering earth orchids and towering Jovian ferns. Nalani occasionally stopped to examine a plant or small creature, her natural curiosity evident in every graceful movement. "May I ask something personal?" Tarek ventured as they paused beside a miniature waterfall. "You may ask," she replied with a hint of teasing. "I may choose not to answer." "Fair enough," he gathered his thoughts. "Yesterday you mentioned resonance being intimate for celestials. What exactly does that mean?" Nalani was quiet for several moments, the patterns on her skin shifting subtly as she considered her response. "For humans, physical touch is your primary intimate connection, yes. Celestials connect through resonance harmonization, the alignment of our internal energy frequencies with another's. It's how we share emotions, memories, even thoughts." "Like telepathy." "More symphonic. Imagine two instruments playing separate melodies that gradually intertwine to create a new composition neither could produce alone." Her voice lowered. "The deeper the resonance, the more profound the connection." Tarek tried to wrap his mind around the concept. "And this happens between all celestials?" "No, compatible resonance patterns are rare, even among our own kind. Finding one's harmonic complement is considered the greatest blessing of a lifetime." She glanced at him sideways. "Some never find it." "And with other species?" "Theoretically impossible," she said softly, "which is why I find you perplexing." Before Tarek could respond, the Arboretum's emergency lights flashed red, and a computerized voice echoed through the chamber. "Attention all personnel, environmental system malfunction detected. Oxygen levels decreasing. Please evacuate to designated safety zones. This is not a drill." Tarek immediately switched to professional mode. "That's the life support system for this entire section. We need to. He was interrupted by his personal communicator. Juno's voice came through, tense and hurried. Tarek, where the hell are you? The atmospheric regulator on level 5 is going haywire, temperatures dropping and oxygen's being diverted somewhere. I'm in the Arboretum, he responded, already moving toward the exit and gesturing for Nilani to follow. What happened? No idea. Chief thinks maybe sabotage, but it could be a cascade failure from those power fluctuations yesterday. We need you at Junction 5G now. On my way. He turned to Nilani, who was already shepherding other Arboretum visitors toward the emergency exits. I have to help with this. Get to the diplomatic wing. It has independent life support. I'm coming with you, she said firmly. It could be dangerous. I can sense energy disruptions in ways your instruments cannot, she interrupted, and I'm not technically bound by your chain of command. There was no time to argue. Together they raced through increasingly chilly corridors, their breath beginning to fog in the rapidly cooling air. Emergency lighting painted everything in harsh red shadows as station personnel hurried in the opposite direction. They reached Junction 5G to find Juno and 2 other technicians frantically working at an exposed panel. Frost was already forming on nearby surfaces. The system thinks there's a fire, Juno explained breathlessly. It's pumping out all the oxygen and dropping the temperature to combat a blaze that doesn't exist. Tarek immediately joined her at the panel. Can we override? Tried, something's corrupted the sensor readings. The backup systems are reading the false data too. Nilani stepped forward, her Luminara patterns glowing more visibly now. May I? Juno glanced questioningly at Tarek, who nodded. The Celestial placed her palms near, but not touching, the exposed circuitry, her eyes closed in concentration. There's a disruption pattern. Here, she murmured. Something inserted into the energy flow, not mechanical, programmed. A virus, Tarek asked. Similar, but it has intention, almost like it's alive. Her brow furrowed. I can feel it adapting to your countermeasures. Juno swore under her breath. That's impossible, unless... She turned toward her diagnostic tool, fingers flying across its interface. Unless someone used the new neural adaptive algorithms from engineering, they're designed to evolve and respond to threats. Can you isolate it? Tarek asked, shivering now as the temperature continued to plummet. Not without shutting down life support entirely, Juno said grimly. Nilani's eyes snapped open. The resonance pattern is similar to Xylanthian crystal algorithms. If I can synchronize with it, I might redirect it. What does that mean? Juno demanded. It means stand back, Tarek said, recognizing the determined set of Nilani's jaw. Give her space. The technicians retreated several steps as Nilani placed both hands directly on the circuit panel. She closed her eyes again, and this time began to emit a multi-layered humming tone, similar to what Tarek had witnessed in the dining hall, but more complex, with harmonics that seemed to phase in and out of audible range. The Luminara patterns across her violet skin brightened dramatically until they traced glowing constellations across her face and hands. Where her fingers touched the circuitry, small arcs of silvery energy danced between components. Tarek watched in fascination as the frost on nearby surfaces began to recede. The emergency lights flickered, then stabilized. Temperature rising, Juno reported, eyes fixed on her diagnostic tool. Oxygen levels normalizing. Whatever she's doing, it's working. The process continued for several long minutes, with Nilani's humming gradually shifting in pitch and complexity. Finally, she opened her eyes, now glowing with the same silver light as her skin patterns, and spoke in a strangely resonant voice. The dissonance is isolated. It requires termination. With that, she pressed her palms firmly against the panel. A bright flash of light emanated from the contact points, and for an instant, the corridor's lighting failed completely before emergency systems engaged. When normal illumination returned seconds later, Nilani was swaying on her feet. Tarek rushed forward to steady her before she could collapse. Are you all right? He asked urgently, supporting her weight against him. The energy pattern was resistant, she mumbled, her voice weak. Had to establish dominant resonance. Juno was already checking her diagnostics. Systems clean. Whatever that virus was, it's gone. She looked at Nilani with newfound respect. You just saved a lot of lives. The violet-skinned diplomat leaned heavily against Tarek. I need recovery space, too much dissonance. I'll take her back to the diplomatic wing, Tarek told Juno. Can you handle the report to the chief? His colleague nodded, still staring at Nilani with undisguised curiosity. Yeah, go and thanks. Tarek helped Nilani through the corridors, her steps becoming steadier as they moved away from the affected area. By the time they reached the diplomatic section's security checkpoint, she could walk unassisted, though the luminous patterns on her skin still pulsed erratically. I should leave you here, he said reluctantly. No, her silver eyes found his. My quarters, please. The security officer recognized Nilani and, after a brief explanation about the crisis, allowed Tarek to accompany her to her assigned quarters. The room was spartanly furnished by human standards, but Tarek noticed subtle differences. The lighting was softer, more diffuse, and a small crystalline device in the center of the room emitted barely perceptible vibrations. Resonance stabilizer, Nilani explained, noticing his gaze. It simulates Xylanthian ambient frequencies. She moved to a large cushion on the floor and sank onto it gracefully. The living silk of her garments rippled and shifted, adapting to her seated position. What exactly happened back there? Tarek asked, remaining standing uncertainly near the door. I synchronized my resonance pattern with the corruption, then introduced a terminal disharmony. She gestured for him to sit on a nearby cushion. It's a defensive technique our peacekeepers use against hostile resonance attacks. You have resonance weapons. All advanced technology can be weaponized, she said simply. But the effort cost me. I'll need time to rebalance. Tarek sat, watching with concern as the patterns on her skin slowly normalized. Should I call someone? Do you need medical attention? No, she smiled weakly. Just stay. Your presence is stabilizing. Me, but I thought human energy patterns were chaotic. Most are yours, she hesitated. Yours harmonizes with mine in ways that should be impossible. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes. Gradually, Nilani's breathing deepened, and the erratic pulsing of her Luminara patterns settled into a gentle rhythm. Better, Tarek asked eventually. Yes, she studied him with renewed intensity. You're not afraid of me, are you, after what you witnessed? Should I be? Most species would be unsettled by such a display of resonance manipulation. It's why we typically conceal our abilities during diplomatic missions. Tarek considered this. I'm not afraid, impressed, yes, maybe a little envious, but not afraid. Curious man, she murmured, then with sudden decision, would you like to experience resonance? His heart rate quickened. Is that allowed? No, a small smile played at her lips. But I find myself increasingly inclined to question our restrictive traditions. Will it hurt? It shouldn't, not with our unusual compatibility. She extended her hand, palm up. A small taste only, surface resonance. Tarek hesitated only briefly before placing his hand in hers. Their palms met, warm violet skin against his tan human flesh. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Alani closed her eyes in concentration, and Tarek felt it. A subtle vibration passing from her hand into his, traveling up his arm and spreading through his chest like warm honey. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced. Not quite touch, not quite sound, but something between that resonated within him at a cellular level. With the physical sensation came emotions that weren't his own. Wonder, curiosity, affection, and something deeper that made his breath catch. Images flickered through his mind. Crystalline spires rising toward twin moons, forests of singing trees, and a young violet-skinned girl gazing at stars with longing. That's, he whispered, unable to find adequate words. Basic resonance sharing, Nilani said softly, her silver eyes opening to meet his. The simplest form of connection among my people. It's beautiful. Tarek found himself leaning closer, drawn by something more powerful than conscious thought. The Luminara patterns across Nilani's skin brightened in response to his proximity. Her free hand rose to hover beside his face, not quite touching. This is unprecedented, she whispered, her musical voice trembling slightly. Cross-species resonance of this clarity shouldn't be possible. Maybe the universe has a sense of humor, Tarek suggested, heart hammering in his chest. Or perhaps, she countered, it has a purpose we don't yet understand. The space between them seemed charged with potential energy. Tarek was acutely aware of their hands still joined, of the continuing flow of resonance between them that seemed to intensify with each passing moment. "If I were to kiss you," he asked quietly, "would that disrupt the resonance?" Nalani's Luminara patterns flared briefly. "I don't know. My people rarely engage in physical expressions of affection. Would you like to find out?" Instead of answering, she closed the remaining distance between them. Her lips met his, soft, warm, and carrying the same subtle vibration as her touch. The resonance between them surged, no longer confined to their joined hands but encompassing them entirely. Tarek felt as though he were falling into silver light. Somewhere in the background of his awareness, he noticed that the small crystalline resonance stabilizer was now glowing brightly, responding to the energy patterns they were creating together. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. The Luminara patterns across Nalani's skin were pulsing in perfect synchronization with Tarek's heartbeat. "That was," she began. "Harmonious," he suggested with a small smile. "Revolutionary," she corrected, her expression a mix of wonder and concern. "No celestial has ever achieved resonant synchronization with another species. It's supposed to be biologically impossible." Tarek gently squeezed her hand, which was still clasped in his. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," she echoed softly, "creating impossibilities." Outside her quarters, the station continued its recovery from the system's failure. Soon, Tarek would be called back to help with repairs and security investigations. Nilani would need to explain her actions to her diplomatic superiors. But for now, in this quiet moment of newfound connection, none of that seemed to matter. They had discovered something unprecedented, a harmony between species that challenged everything both of them had been taught about the fundamental nature of connection. And with only 2 days remaining before Nalani's scheduled departure, every moment of that harmony became infinitely precious.